but it's not a song that I'm going to sing. It's a song of Kabir's, and it is titled Kabir, the Oil It Burns. So I will recite it to you as it appears in Daniel Ladinsky's book, Love Poems from God. Kabir, the Oil It Burns. I am standing naked in the marketplace, but no one turns their head to look at me, for no one can see me as I am. Still, I offer my friendship to all. Still, to each wing and fin and cell, I will forever be in obeisance. I will be forever in obeisance. Anyone who bows touches my feet. Anyone who sings helps me in my work. All labor is because my sinew quivers. I cover the divine flame in my heart, for if I turned God loose from my house, the earth would reveal to your eyes what mine always sees. Existence is a lamp, and Kabir, the oil it burns. The king is in a mood to grant pardons to acts yet done. If you can understand that kind of power that is dormant in you, you may be ready for a teacher like Kabir. I am standing naked in the world, forever in homage to all movement. I cherish every atom that moves. I cherish every atom that he moves in this dance. I'm going to read that last again. I am standing naked in the world, forever in homage to all movement. I cherish every atom that he moves in this dance. As I said, that's in Love Poems from God on page 234. September is a month for study of bhakti yoga. A bhakti yogi, a bhakta, has a devotional relationship with God. This is developed over time by study, prayer, ritual, and worship. As a bhakta, you practice giving every action, thought, emotion, perception, and tendency a Godward turn. Everything you are, positive and negative, is offered to the divine presence. Your prayer is for the carefree self-surrender of a child in its mother or father's arms, and ultimately union with your beloved. Now, if you want to know by what's meant by all that, you can go back and listen to last week's talk, which was titled A Little Improvement. It was about what's in that paragraph on the definition of bhakti. The title of this week's talk is Where There Is Love. Where There Is Love. I'm going to read that Kabir poem at the end of this talk as well, and see if you don't hear it differently than you just heard it as it was read now. Where there is love. Swami Vivekananda said, all love is expansion. All selfishness is contraction. Love, love is therefore the only law of life. He who loves lives. He who is selfish is dying. Therefore, love, for love's sake, because it is the only law of life, just as you breathe to live. Therefore, love, for love's sake, because it is the only law of life, just as you breathe to live. The Swami's words may appeal to us. You may very badly want to live as he asks of you. But how? But how? That question must naturally arise. How? Let's think for a moment about an arranged marriage. Typically, the couple in an arranged marriage does not know one another well, let alone love one another before the wedding. Their love is discovered only by trial and error over time, as they live together and practice a loving relationship. It is not easy to learn how it is done. Yet if it is done, it can be very rewarding. For a bhakti yogi, a bhakta, it is much the same. You may be inclined toward love of God, yet in the beginning, she or he is not really known to you. Patient and persistent practice of devotion awakens a deep current of love that connects you, that you slowly and slowly find has always connected you to the divine presence. What is the patient and persistent practice of devotion? What does that mean? In chapter 12 of Bhagavad-Gita, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, those whose minds are fixed on me in steadfast love, worshiping me with absolute faith, I consider those to have the greater understanding of yoga. Quickly I come to those who offer me every action, worship me only, their dearest delight, with devotion undaunted. Because they love me, these are my bondspeople, and I shall save them from mortal sorrow and all the waves of life's deathly ocean. So Krishna mentions steadfast love, absolute faith, offer me every action, worship me only, devotion undaunted. Is this something that will come to us easily? No. Yet, God's love is limitless and unconditional. You can find that kind of love within yourself. As Swami Vivekananda wrote in his letter to a friend, from the highest God to the worm and beyond, to the atoms in the stars, everywhere the same God loves all. Friend, lay your mind, soul, and body at their feet. He is in front of you right now in the different forms he's taken. If you turn away from them, where will you find him? The first to love all beings without thinking worships God. So this morning we will explore the meaning of these quotes from Sri Krishna and Swami Vivekananda and others that teach us how to practice and thereby know the joy of love. Two questions may naturally arise in your mind. What does Brother Shankara mean by love? And what does it mean to practice love? Now, many of you have heard me speak of a woman named Jill Bolte Taylor. Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroanatomist. At the time I'm going to speak of, she was, first of all, she was Harvard trained, a Harvard PhD, and she was working in the faculty of Harvard as a neuroanatomist, doing postdoctoral work and research and part of that very competitive, very aggressive community of scholars that populates Harvard. This is not a herd of cattle. This is the cream of the cream, so to say. Now, what happened to Jill Bolte Taylor as a neuroanatomist? She observed herself having a massive, and I mean massive, stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain. It took virtually all her left brain functions offline. She observed herself having this stroke and managed, as she was having it, to reach out to her colleagues and so get medical help. And so she was hospitalized, but she was, to all exterior, to all someone looking at her from outside, she had been reduced to an absolutely infantile state. But her experience was very different. So I'm going to give you a good bit, certainly not the whole book by any manner of means, but the pertinent information from Jill Bolte's book, My Stroke of Insight. Every one of you who wants to deeply understand what this talk is about, I suggest you read the entire book. The title of this talk is Where There Is Love. She found, that's a pun, where there is love and where there is love. She found where there is love. So this is from Jill Bolte Taylor, My Stroke of Insight. My stroke of insight is that the core of my right hemisphere consciousness, my stroke of insight is that at the core of my right hemisphere consciousness is a character that is directly connected to my feeling of deep inner peace. It is completely committed, that character is completely committed to the expression of, not just to the experience, the expression. That character is completely committed to the expression of peace, love, joy, and compassion in the world. Continuing the quote from her. Having taken this unexpected journey into the depths of my brain, I am grateful and amazed that I have completely recovered physically, cognitively, emotionally, and spiritually. Over 8 years, the recovery of my left hemisphere skills has been tremendously challenging for many different reasons. When I lost the function of my left brain's neurological networks, I lost not only function, but also a variety of personality characteristics that were apparently associated with those circuits of aptitude. Recovering cells of function that were anatomically linked to a lifetime of emotional reactivity and negative thinking has been a mind-opening experience. Although I wanted to regain my left hemisphere skills, I must say that there were personality traits that tried to rise from the ashes of my left mind that, quite frankly, were no longer acceptable to my right hemispheric sense of who I now wanted to be. From both a neuroanatomical and psychological perspective, I have had a fascinating few years. I'm sorry. from a neuroanatomical and psychological perspective. I've had a fascinating few years. The question I faced over and over again was, do I have to regain the affect, emotion, or personality trait that was neurologically linked to the memory or ability that I wanted to recover? For instance, would it be possible for me to recover my perception of myself, where I exist as a single, solid, separate from the whole, without recovering the cells associated with my egotism? Without recovering the cells associated with my egotism, intense desire to be argumentative, need to be right, or fear of separation and death? Could I value money without hooking into the neurological loops of lack, greed, or selfishness? Could I regain my personal power in the world, play the game of hierarchy, and yet not lose my sense of compassion or perception of equality among all people? Could I re-engage with my family and not hook into my issues related to being a little sister? Most important, could I retain my newfound sense of connection with the universe in the presence of my left hemisphere's individuality? I wondered how much of my newfound right hemisphere consciousness, set of values, and resultant personality I would have to sacrifice in order to recover the skills of my left mind. I didn't want to lose my connection to the universe. I didn't want to experience myself as a solid, separate from everything. I didn't want my mind to spin so fast that it was no longer in touch with my authentic self. Notice what she now characterizes as her authentic self, the right hemisphere character, the right hemisphere personality. Back to her quote. Frankly, I didn't want to give up nirvana. What price would my right hemisphere consciousness have to pay so I could once again be judged as normal? Modern neuroscientists seem satisfied intellectualizing about the functional asymmetries of the two hemispheres from a neurological perspective, but there has been minimal conversation pertaining to the psychological or personality differences contained within these two structures, the two hemispheres of the brain. Most commonly, the character of the right mind has been ridiculed and portrayed in an extremely unflattering light, simply because it does not understand verbal language or comprehend linear thought. If you read her book, you'll find out in detail how the right hemisphere does think and communicate. But I don't want to go into that this morning. There's other fish to fry, so to speak. But it does not, the right hemisphere does not understand verbal language or comprehend linear thought. Our right hemisphere personality is often depicted as an uncontrollable, potentially violent, moronic, rather despicable ignoramus, which is not even conscious, and without which we would probably be better off. In vast contrast, our left mind has been routinely touted as linguistic, sequential, methodical, rational, smart, and the seat of our consciousness. Albert Einstein said it this way: The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. I'm going to read that again. This is a deeply considered opinion of one of the finest minds of the 20th century, Albert Einstein. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And since we're all a part of that society, is it any surprise that we are, by and large, ignorant of our right hemisphere character and awareness? Back to Jill Bolte Taylor. Prior to this experience with stroke, the cells in my left hemisphere had been capable of dominating the cells in my right hemisphere. The judging and analytical character in my left mind dominated my personality. When I experienced the hemorrhage and lost my left hemisphere language center cells that defined myself, those cells could no longer inhibit the cells in my right mind. As a result, I have gained a clear delineation of the two very distinct characters cohabiting my cranium. The two halves of my brain don't just perceive and think in different ways at a neurological level, but they demonstrate very different values based upon the types of information they perceive, and thus they exhibit two very different personalities. So to repeat what I read at the beginning, my stroke of insight is that at the core of my right hemisphere consciousness is a character that is directly connected to my feeling of deep inner peace. It is completely committed to the expression of peace, love, joy, and compassion in the world. Now that's the end of the quotes from Jill Bolte Taylor. In sum, as you will hear if you heard or listened to last week's talk, through the practice of devotional worship, bhakti yoga, we gain access to our right hemisphere awareness and personality. That right hemisphere consciousness is what we become aware of and abide in more and more as we practice the yoga of devotion. Like the newly married couple in an arranged marriage, we slowly and slowly become aware of love and how to be in that space of love day in and day out. It requires years of dedicated practice. Yet, as the great Catholic monk and teacher Thomas Merton wrote in a letter to his friend, our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. I'll start again. Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. That is not our business. In fact, it is nobody's business. What we are asked to do is love, and this love itself will render both ourselves and our neighbors worthy. Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. That is not our business, and in fact, it is nobody's business. What we are asked to do is love, and this love itself will render both ourselves and our neighbors worthy. Now, of course, what he's doing is simply putting into more modern and direct language what Christ said. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Ask and ye shall receive. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. As Jill Bolte Taylor wrote, this journey of discovery starts with finding the place of love within yourself. This journey of discovery starts with finding that place of love within yourself. And it is a journey of discovery. The Dalai Lama says, if you don't love yourself, you cannot love others. You will not be able to love others. If you have no compassion for yourself, then you are not able of developing compassion for others. When we feel love and kindness toward others, this is now not, that was the end of the quote from the Dalai Lama. I'll read it again. If you don't love yourself, you cannot love others. You will not be able to love others. If you have no compassion for yourself, then you are not able of developing compassion for others. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a continuation of the Dalai Lama's quote. When we feel love and kindness toward others, it not only makes others feel loved and cared for, but it helps also to develop an inner happiness and peace. When we feel love and kindness toward others, it not only makes others feel loved and cared for, it helps us also to develop inner happiness and peace. And this was Jill Bolte Taylor's experience. She was forced to it. And she was so glad. She was so happy. First, it's remarkable. In reading her book, you can see she was happy to be a neuroanatomist experiencing herself having a stroke. What a thing for a neuroanatomist. I'm watching myself lose my neurological functions of my left hemisphere. And she took great note. She took great note of what was happening to her. But then when she discovered what she came to identify as her authentic self in the right hemisphere, how much more grateful she was. And as she said, it was, as she says in the book, it was something of a struggle for her to decide to emerge from that state, to risk compromising nirvana, to regain her left hemisphere capabilities. But she did over 8 years. She worked at it so hard, you'll see if you read the book. Swami Vivekananda wrote in his letter to a friend, from the highest God to the worm and beyond, to the atoms in the stars, everywhere the same God loves all. Friend, lay your mind, soul, and body at their feet. He is in front of you right now in the different forms he has taken. If you turn away from them, where will you find him? The first to love all beings without thinking worships God. Vivekananda also said, begin to love. Power must go. Nothing must stand between me and God except love. God is only love and nothing else. Love first, love in the middle, and love at the end. A key phrase in that paragraph is power must go. This means the left hemisphere's dominance over the right hemisphere character and personality must go. Power must go. This means the left hemisphere's dominance over the right hemisphere character and personality must go. And it can be done. It can be done. Now here is Kabir again. This is the same poem that I read in the beginning. See if you don't hear it differently. The title is Kabir, the oil it burns. I am standing naked in the marketplace, but no one turns their head to look at me, for no one can see me as I am. Still, I offer my friendship to all. Still, to each wing and fin and cell, I will be forever in obeisance. Anyone who bows touches my feet. Anyone who sings helps me in my work. All labor is because my sinew quivers. I cover the divine flame in my heart, for if I turned God loose from my house, the earth would reveal to your eyes what mine always sees. Existence is a lamp, and Kabir, the oil it burns. The king is in a mood to grant pardons, to acts yet done. If you can understand that kind of power that is dormant in you, you may be ready for a teacher like Kabir. I am standing naked in the world, forever in homage to all movement. I cherish every atom that he moves. I cherish every atom that he moves in this dance. I didn't stop in the middle this time for questions and comments because I wanted to keep the continuity from Jill Bolte Taylor to the other quotes and the other encouragements from such as the Dalai Lama and Albert Einstein, Thomas Merton, and so on. But now we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time. So please, what did this give rise to you and you? What is this to you? What do you think? What do you feel? This is where we practice the art of spirituality together as a congregation. This is where we go forward together. Comments, questions?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
Since we're talking about love, I have a great quote I picked up from Kabir's. It says, "Love does not grow on trees or bought in the market. But if one wants to be loved, one must first know how to give unconditional love." By Kabir.
Yes, well, that is, and we heard him talking about his unconditional love, but he was not speaking as the personality Kabir. As he said, Kabir, that personality of Kabir is the oil that existence burns. Existence, he was speaking as existence itself. He was speaking as that divine presence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haima. No, you can't buy it in the marketplace.
Yes.
There's no package. Wherever everyone is a package.
That's right.
You can't buy one in the marketplace.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Haim.
Shankara.
Yes, Sham.
Yeah, what I want to ask you is, if you don't love others, how can you expect love from others?
Well, precisely. That's exactly what these teachers tell us. And it starts with loving yourself. It starts with being aware of that place within yourself that so many of these poets call the beloved or the one or whatever it is that they, however it is they refer to it. They're talking about their discovery of what we think of as the heart or the bliss body, whatever it is, however you want to speak about it. Jill Bolte Taylor talks about it as this right hemisphere awareness that is always there. But because of the society in which we are embedded, it is disguised from us. And so our spiritual practice slowly and slowly reveals it to us. And it reveals itself to us. And as you said, Sham, then you are capable, you love yourself because you see that you are the receptacle for this. You are the vehicle for this. And then loving yourself, you love others. And then, as you say, then you're able to receive love from others. Thank you, Sham. That's exactly right.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you.
Hari Om Shankaraji.
Hari Om Balaji, what's up?
Okay, I enjoyed the talk, but
Good.
actually what Swami was saying, Vivekananda, it is so important because even though we have been doing all these practices and all those things, it is the love, not only when you give the love to others, it's not only they enjoy, you enjoy that love too.
Yes.
Exactly what when we talk about enjoy the journey, the spiritual journey, that is where we get that happiness and that bliss.
Yes. You're absolutely right, Balakrishna. Thank you. That's where we find it. And really nowhere else in any deeply meaningful sense. We may be happy for a day. We might even be happy and blissful for 3 days. But it won't persist. And it won't be there for us whenever we turn our attention inward, like it is when we do turn our attention inward and find it there.
Brother Shankar, this is Keith.
Yes, Keith.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
What caught my attention is I have begun to look at the brain as kind of an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear that it actually does play a part in spiritual growth, it's interestingly enough, an interesting choice of words, kind of mind-blowing for me. So it makes me look at things a lot differently from that perspective. I'm still processing what it means because it kind of opened some things up for me, but that was kind of awesome to hear.
Good, good. Yes, the left brain can be an obstacle. But as Einstein said, properly regarded, it is a faithful servant, which is what is meant by Sri Ramakrishna's phrase, a ripe ego. The left mind, as an unripe ego, dominates. It's its natural way of being, particularly in this society. Whereas Einstein said, we've learned to treasure it and ignore the gift. So we find our way at first past the left mind through our spiritual practices. We simply, the left mind's attempts to intrude on our spiritual practice are set to the side. Say, no, I'm not going to participate in that right now. I'm going to participate in that which brings me bliss and joy. Not more thinking, not more figuring it out, and I'll be happy if. No, I'll be happy now. But the mind will continue to persist in its attempts to interrupt us until finally we learn to, as I say, sink below it, sink toward the silence, ultimately sink into the silence. So I recommend to everyone, it's an inexpensive book. It's a short book. It's not even a half-inch thick. I recommend that everyone read that lovely book of Jill Bolte Taylor's. What a testament. You know, she rediscovered many of the things, many of the practices and principles that are discussed in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. She didn't know anything about Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, but she had a name for what we call samskaras. She calls them neural loops. And it's exactly the same thing that Patanjali talks about. You stimulate one of those samskaras, what happens? It demonstrates its characteristic way of being. That's exactly what she says about the neural loops. You touch it, it gives you what it has. And she said, I learned to control and ignore those that were not in accord with who I now regard as my authentic self. So we mustn't allow the left hemisphere personality and characteristics to dominate. Not if we want to. If what we want to be is the head of a Fortune 500 company, then go for that left brain. If you want to instead be calm and happy and in a very different kind of home in this world, seek the right hemisphere consciousness.
Brother Shankar?
Yes, Bhagirath. I was waiting to hear from you.
Yes. I mean, thinking about it, I'll try to be as brief as I can, but I have a few points.
Please.
At least I'll bring out 3 points. Number one, about the pre-arranged marriage. The reason why the parental arrangement or pre-arrangement of the marriage works because she is determined to make it successful. If she says, let me try whether this my parental arrangement works or not, it will not work. Because it requires a predetermined mind that I am going to make it work no matter what. And again, if you apply that, the right side of the brain, it will work. Because she wants to forgive everything which is done by the left brain. If he abuses, don't worry, after all, he is my husband. I should not mind it. That way you can feel good while suffering enormously and needlessly. This is the reason why I think your case presentation, although very right, needs some modification. Because if you cannot allow the left brain to take the dominance, you cannot allow the right brain to take the dominance either. This is the reason why God has given us 2 hemispheres and they're connected by a wide band called corpus callosum that communicates between the two brains. This is the reason why Ramakrishna by himself would not have been as successful in the West as Vivekananda was, because Vivekananda could coordinate both the right side and the left side. And that's why I would say, no matter what, we do need a constant communication, a coordinated communication, a harmonious communication between the two brains. One lets you survive, the other lets you thrive. Now, the case that you presented, the moment you apply the left brain to understand the case, the whole message is ruined. Because as a left-sided brain, I would say, where was the hemorrhage? How big was the hemorrhage? Was there any scan done on that one? Before this hemorrhage, was she left-sided person or was she a right-sided person? After this, could she solve some of the neuroanatomical problems or she fumbled on that one? These all ruins the message that you want to give that should stem from the right brain. Because we have to know exactly how to coordinate between the two of them.
First comment,
Yes.
Bhagavad, I suggest you read the book before you make any further decisions about Jill Bolte Taylor's. She represents herself quite well in the book. It's a short read, and I suggest you read it. To return to your first point, that sounds to me remarkably paternalistic and one-sided. That it depends entirely on the girl's, the wife's, determination to make it work, and that she must suffer and forgive no matter what her husband does. I adamantly denounce that attitude. And so does Vivekananda. And so did Holy Mother. Absolutely not. It must be balanced. Now, you may be speaking from the traditional perspective, but I say, and I don't like to be argumentative with you, Bhagirath, but in this case, I feel very strongly about this. That paternalism that says it's the wife's responsibility, the girl's responsibility to make it work, I denounce it. And it is absolutely inappropriate as far as I'm concerned. Yes, both people must learn how to love, but no one must suffer needlessly.
Certainly. May I add something?
Wait. Let me. Brother Shankar, I did not want in any way to condone. I'm just telling you what is happening. And therefore, that is not a perfect solution to the whole thing. So if you denounce that, I denounce that even more vehemently. But nevertheless, we have to be aware of what is going on and find out ways to correct it and to make it once again into a harmonious balance. That was my point.
Oh, very good. If indeed it becomes a harmonious balance, that's exactly what it should be. Yes,
Yeah.
Uma.
Yes. I'm so glad that you mentioned Patanjali. In this same vein, I'm trying to look at Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 12, and the earlier chapter 2, in which Krishna talks about Sthita Prajna, one whose left side of the brain is very disciplined. It is balanced. It is steady wisdom. So when we are talking about left side of the brain, I think we should also include not only rationality, but that intuitive wisdom, which is the predominant quality of the right brain that is rich in emotion, in all kinds of benevolent emotions, love, forgiveness, kindness, and all that. So, time and again, I think Krishna talks about the Sthita-prajna quality in which both hemispheres come together and they function in harmony, in balance. For example, in chapter 12, the last few shlokas, Krishna asks what kind of devotee I like. Remember? So he says, Same Bhakta Priya. This kind of devotee I love because in spite of knowing that, intelligence and all this worldliness and all these things are okay, you need them, but you are not dominated by that mind. So he says, Santushta, self-content, Nirmama, he is not attached, he is Nira Ahankar, egoless. So this is, I think, the best solution. That talking about that stroke of insight, I agree 100%. But what I'm trying to say here is to allude to Bhagavad-Gita and say how Krishna finds a way of making both of them benefit from each other by harmony, by conquering the egoistic side of the mind, left mind. And if you have to err on one side, better to err on the cultivating only the right side of the brain, which is pure love.
Yes.
So purity and intelligence should work hand in hand in harmony.
Yes. Thank you, Uma. That was very, very well said. As Vivekananda said, if there is an argument between the mind and the heart, go with the heart.
Yes.
And Bhagirath, when he said that we have the gift of both hemispheres, so that we can function successfully as a human being. Yes, absolutely. But I really recommend everyone to read this book and see what Jill Bolte Taylor, who was and remained, after she regained all her faculties, she remained one of the foremost neuroanatomists in her field. But she behaved very differently. She behaved very differently because of who she saw herself as, her authentic self. As she said, if it came to a competition between the things of the left mind and the right mind, I would sit to the right.
Yes.
I would sit to the right. She would deliberately choose the things of the right mind because of what she saw as, well, not just saw, completely experienced. This is why I say it's so good to read the book, because I read you just tiny portions of it. But she explains in great detail what she experienced as she was immersed in this right mind consciousness, and their left mind awareness was not available to her. As I said, she appeared to external, to anyone looking on from the outside, she appeared to be infantile. And for that matter, she did not even know her mother or what a mother was when her mother came to help her. So, to return to the Einstein quote, the intuitive mind is the gift. And he says that this is where all of his discoveries came from. He then used the left mind to spell them out so that others could understand them. But all of his discoveries came from his participation in the right mind, the right hemisphere.
Brother Shankar,
Yes.
can you please expand or explain what you meant by first time when you read the poem by Kabir?
Yes.
And you say that at the end you see the difference. I would like you to tell more about it.
Well, did you hear it differently when you heard it the last time? The second time?
Not quite understood that much.
Oh, all right. We can see clearly when we hear the poem the second time that he's speaking from that right hemisphere space as defined by Jill Bolte Taylor. Spontaneous, committed to, dedicated to love, peace, joy, happiness, sharing, unity, all of that. So that, now listen to the poem again, if you will. Kabir, the oil it burns. Now just hear this from that perspective. He's speaking as that divine presence, which spontaneously is available to us in that right hemisphere space. I am standing naked in the marketplace, but no one turns their head to look at me, for no one can see me as I am. If you remember, that's exactly what Krishna says, and he's at chapter 5 or chapter 6, one or the other. He says exactly that same thing, exactly. But he, Kabir, isn't quoting Krishna. I can guarantee it. He is using that metaphor, consciously, I'm sure. But he's speaking for himself. No one can see me as I am. Still, even though they don't see me as I am, still I offer my friendship to all. Still to each wing and fin and cell. In other words, all of the beings of existence. I will be forever in obeisance. I offer myself to them, in other words. And then he says, speaking as that divine presence, anyone who bows touches my feet. Anyone who sings helps me in my work. All labor, all right? Anyone who sings helps me in my work. And then he says, labor, all work, all labor is because my sinew quivers. I then, he says, but I cover this flame in my heart. For if I turned God loose, the God that I am and know, or if I turned God loose from my house in the marketplace, the earth would reveal to your eyes what mine always see. What my eyes always see. And why would that be a bad thing? Because most people would not be able to deal with it. It would actually be damaging to them. They would become dysfunctional. Existence is a lamp. Not just Kabir is the oil it burns. We are all the oil that existence is burning. The earth would reveal to your eyes what mine always sees. See, existence is a lamp, and Kabir, the oil it burns. We are the oil that existence is burning. These spacesuits, these these experience and action suits we have, as Krishna says, they are created by the Atman for its own purpose. And this is Kabir's way of saying that. Existence is a lamp, and Kabir, the existence and experience suit, is the oil it burns. And then he says, there's always, Kabir's lips are always upturned. There's this humorous gesture. The king is in a mood to grant pardons to acts yet done. There's nothing for you to feel bad or guilty about. The king is in a mood to grant pardons to acts yet done. If you can understand that kind of power that is dormant in you, you may be ready for a teacher like Kabir. And then he repeats, I am standing naked in the world, forever in homage to all movement. I cherish every atom. I love, cherish is like prema, as there's bhakti, there's love, there's prema, cherish. I cherish every atom that he moves in this dance. So that's a summary, a very short summary of how I hear this poem.
Thank you.
Yes.
Brother Shankar, I wanted to share something.
Yes, please,
Marla. I wanted to read a small passage from a book that I had read by Tom Cohen, and it's called Yearning for the Wind, and it's about Celtic thought. And so it says, an old Gaelic blessing says, you are the pure love of the moon. You are the pure love of the stars. You are the pure love of the sun and the dew and the rain. And finally, you are the pure love of each living creature. Now, the Scottish Highland has the opposite direction. They bless each other with expressions like, the love and affection of the moon be yours. The love and affection of the sun be yours. The love and affection of the stars be yours, and on, including other natural elements until love and affection of each living creature be yours. It strains our modern sensibilities and triggers our calloused cynicism to entertain the thought that we live in a loving and affectionate universe. Imagine how your life would change if you believe this, and imagine how you would have to change your life if you believe this.
Ah, yes, both those things. Imagine how your life would change. Imagine how it would have to change if you believe this. And that's what Jill Bolte Taylor's book is about. How she had to change because what she was and had been was simply taken away. She had no more left hemisphere function. None. The hemorrhage, the hemorrhage was so great that she was left without left hemisphere function. And Bhagirath, I really suggest that before you think any more about this, you read the book. It's really worth your time.
I definitely will do that, but Brother Shankar, my idea was not that. In raising these points, my idea is not about her personal experience, the accuracy or inaccuracy of it. I believe it. But what I'm saying is to show you the other side of it. For example, I had a tremendous teacher, and he was called Walking Encyclopedia in Medicine. You ask him anything at any time, and he would exactly quote the right thing. And then he had a massive stroke. And after that stroke, he behaved in a very particular way. For example, for absolutely incurable diseases, he would write a prescription of aspirin and say, don't worry, he will be all right. So there are always two sides of a particular thing. My idea is that yes, God has given us the gift. And I would absolutely agree that the right side is a gift because you have to develop it. The left side, you develop it, but it is always perilous. You may lose it anytime. But there are people, even in medicine, like Dr. Pare, a French surgeon, he used to say that I only stitch the wounds, God heals them. This is a perfect combination of right and left brain. And if you ever do that, the benefit will not be to the person who did it, but with everyone around. Because he would give you a very condensed and correct message, which we all need to hear. That was the point.
Very good, very good.
That way, even Brother Kabir, what he said in the last time, that the whatever moves the stars and everything, that line, it is exactly like Ishopanishad. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Whatever motivates the motion of this universe is also because of him.
Yes.
So Kabir could not be, nobody could see Kabir in the poem, but he was a seer, so he could see everything.
Yes.
That to me is the beauty of the whole thing. And that's why I enjoyed your talk today.
Very good. Thank you, dear. Anyone else? This is beautiful. This is exactly how we learn together.
But Shankara, it's Keith.
Yes, Keith.
So I wonder, since and again, she lost her right brain, right?
No, left brain, left entire left hemisphere capabilities.
So I think you mentioned earlier that the left brain, a lot of it was about survival, right?
Well, no, I didn't say that exactly. But I would agree that we depend on our left mind for our coping and survival skills. Yes.
Yeah, I've always wondered about this, whether or not, because obviously survival for us is not what it used to be when we first touched down on this planet. I often wonder whether or not it has evolved with the new form of survival, and it's kind of overdoing things. And that's why it may have taken over, because it seems to be in control in most of the world. So it's just kind of a musing of mine that I've often thought about, whether or not evolutionary, in an evolutionary fashion, it's caught up with where we are in terms of survival. We're not walking through, jungles possibly being attacked, and we don't have to forage for food. So, and because it seems to be overactive, and taking over the control of the whole brain, and until you can tap in through some kind of a religious experience. So it's just kind of a musing of mine.
Well, it is a very important musing. And you're right that we used to have to depend much more on our intuition and our being present to our senses in a different way than we are now. We are largely, and it's one of the reasons that the things have to be so intense. Our senses are so numbed. The senses of a native in the highlands of Bolivia above the Amazon, so-called primitive people, their senses are much, much sharper than ours. And they sense things at a distance, and they hear things, and they smell things at a distance. And they depend on their intuition much more. The more sophisticated people who are deeply involved in their intuition are the so-called shamans in that part of the world called yatiri. Our modern society, our membership as it exists right now, is so heavily dependent on the left mind that it's as Einstein said, we've created a society that worships the servant and has forgotten the gift.
Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
What you said last makes me so laugh because exactly that's how in India, farmers used to predict the weather without all these modern weather reports and continuous, weathermen giving reports about how it's going to rain or not rain and how much it's going to rain. Plain and simple, a farmer will look at the sky, or a peacock would start, making certain kind of sound. So by all these natural elements of nature, they would figure out what kind of weather it's going to be. Is it going to rain heavily or lightly? And it not need such extremely technical, left brain mind handle, kind of reports.
Yes, I knew a woman who was a shaman in the highlands, the central valley between the two ranges of the Andes.
Yeah.
She could look at the sky and tell you what things were going to be like for the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And she wasn't secretly consulting her pocket radio.
Yeah. Here we every time look at our, weather reports and plan things. But
yes, well, as Bhagirath points out, both are necessary.
Both.
I suspect that that shaman, that shamaness in Bolivia would not be able to predict the emergence of a hurricane that was forming in the East Atlantic that was going to become dangerous in a week's time. And yet with our modern left mind derived technology, we can do that. And so we need both.
Both, exactly.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
I wanted to read a paragraph from Swami Vivekananda's complete works, Karma Yoga, and then ask a question.
Yes.
So this paragraph is, we say Newton discovered gravitation. Was it sitting anywhere in a corner waiting for him?
Yeah.
It was in his own mind. The time came and he found it out. All knowledge that the world has ever received comes from the mind. The infinite library of the universe is in your own mind. The external world is simply the suggestion, the occasion which sets you to study your own mind, but the object of your study is always your own mind. The falling of an apple gave the suggestion to Newton, and he studied it in his own mind. He rearranged all the previous links of thought in his mind and discovered a new link among them, which we call the law of gravitation. It was not in the apple, nor in anything in the center of the earth. So my question is, there must have been, I guess, some spark in his right mind that lit up, which then allowed his left mind to rearrange the links.
That sounds like a very appropriate reading of what happened. Yes, he I'm sure he, so to speak, meditated on in Newton's own way, as Einstein had his own way. He meditated on, he concentrated on the act of the apple falling. And as you say, some spark of the knowledge that exists already within flared, and then he used his left mind to explain that, to put that into language, to put that into symbols, which is the real forte of the left mind. I mean, just putting together one of these talks is a complete cooperation between the between the two halves of this, you know.
Isn't it called the aha moment?
Yes, the aha moment. Yes, exactly. Who was it? The fellow who was in the bathtub and discovered
Archimedes.
Archimedes, yeah. Eureka, I have found it.
Eureka.
Oh. Yeah, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
It's I'm really enjoying listening. I've had a little trouble with my iTab. For some reason, it didn't want to let me into your Zoom session. I'm on my iPhone right now. Whoops. Didn't mean to let me. Yeah, there it is. What's going on? Yeah, okay. And, there's an old, about 30 years ago, there was a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Drawing on the Right Side of the Mind, yes.
Yeah, by Betty Edwards. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that.
Yes.
Yes.
She would have you, ways to have greater access to the right hemisphere of the brain, knowing that there is kind of a wisdom or a skillfulness about the right hemisphere that the left hemisphere seems to miss.
Yeah,
I know.
The drawing, the word drawing is a pun. She recommends you actually draw pictures with your non-dominant hand. If you're right-handed, draw pictures with your left hand. If you're left-handed, draw pictures with your right hand. So the drawing was meant literally as well as figuratively.
So you're familiar with that school of thought or that?
Oh yes, absolutely.
And it was, she would also suggest that you take something like a familiar picture and you turn it upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And then draw the picture while you're looking at it upside down, because that forces you to get out of the habitual concepts and the habitual patterning of the left brain that you have to. If you're looking at something upside down, you really have to actually notice the how the curves and the angles and the proportions, you perceive it in in some ways a more accurate way than if you just look at a picture and say, oh well, that's the Taj Mahal. I know the Taj Mahal. I can but when you turn it upside down, so this is a really I think a profound subject. And I have a rather a relentless left brain myself.
Yes.
And sometimes I feel that I'm actually in kind of in relapse, in terms of defending my left brain and advocating for my left brain. But I find that there's a Sanskrit saying that I've enjoyed, which is all the seas of the universe lie within him, yet in that small pool he lies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if everybody heard that okay, but it's that idea that the right hemisphere and that intuitive function in some ways gives you access to all the seas of the universe.
Yes.
But when we're locked into our instrumental reason and our kind of scientific causality, we can only see things through that small pool of we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And I know you're familiar with all that stuff, Brother Shankara, but
but beautifully said, Paul. Beautifully said. So that drawing on the right side of the brain, drawing on the right side of the mind, is a good book to read. Another one, though it's flawed, it's still very interesting. It's called The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, which is in the elaboration of a PhD dissertation. And it is, by consciousness, he means modern consciousness. The origin of The Origin of Modern Consciousness, or The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. And the breakdown of the bicameral mind came about, according to his dissertation, because of a genetic mutation that increased the size of the corpus callosum, and therefore the communication between the two hemispheres of the brain. So that's an interesting book to read as well.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend, as I've said, everyone that wishes to find themselves a copy of Jill Bolte Taylor's book and read that.
Yes.
It is absolutely fascinating for a start. It is compelling, and it is beautiful.
Yeah, while you were talking, I on my laptop I looked her up again on YouTube, and I very easily found 3 or 4 YouTube talks. One of them is with Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
So that's a high authority. That it's like an hour conversation, and so there's a lot to that. And just one, if I may make one quick final comment. I'm taking a class right now at Emory through Zoom on philosophy, and it's really intriguing that the cutting edge of philosophy today is really kind of rejecting logical analysis, and at least in some schools, the German existential school, it's saying that it's really more a matter of a mythopoetic kind of reasoning, that whenever we have a really something important to say about the human condition or life or how to live life or something, that we usually have to resort to more of a right brain type of metaphor, and that has a more powerful and in some ways maybe a more true way of expressing things. And I just find that very interesting that they're going back to something that kind of more of, I don't even want to call it intuition or intuitive, because it's more of a kind of a primary way of kind of thinking that does not involve Aristotelian logic or the syllogisms of I won't go into the syllogisms, but it's really more. And I know in our nonviolent communication class that there's a number of people from our Atlanta Vedanta Center. We're also doing something with translating left brain language into right brain language.
Yes.
Because in the nonviolent communication, if someone says, I think you're a rotten person, we wouldn't take that we wouldn't just hear that with our left brain. We would hear them with our right brain and imagine that this person is in pain and they have an unmet need and that they're asking for help. And there's so we do a lot of translating of the left brain into the right brain in terms of seeing through the eyes of the heart and the eyes of love. But anyway, I'll be silent now. Thank you. I've enjoyed this. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Paul, very much. Yes, this mythopoeic way of figuring or describing reality can very much be found in the work of Joseph Campbell. Another book that is highly recommended is Campbell's The Masks of God, which is just a remarkable meditation on how we have all these left brain symbologies for the right brain presence of the divine. Thank you, Paul. Anyone else, you beautiful people? This has been splendid. So if there's nothing else, then we'll just wind this up for today. Chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean, and quench that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. O name, stream down in moonlight on the lotus heart, opening its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drown deep in the waves of his bliss, chanting his name continually, tasting his nectar at every step, bathing in his name, that bath for weary souls. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us, and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. So, dear ones, if you choose to join us tomorrow evening, we will be discussing some more of Rabia's poems from that book, Love Poems from God. It's an intriguing group because it's not a class. It's peer-led, and it is people read the poems and then they're discussed to the extent that discussion is desired and warranted. And then we go on to the next poem. And we'll slowly, slowly, slowly work our way through that entire book, which is a beautiful, beautiful book. That poem that I read of Kabir's today is on page 234 of the book, pretty much smack in the middle. Until tomorrow night, for those of you who choose to join us, the link is on the website and on the Facebook page and in your e-newsletter. Any of you who are not signed up for the e-newsletter, please do, so that you'll stay aware. It's only about a 3 to 5 minute read. Cindy does an excellent job of streamlining the information and making it accessible to us very quickly. And then, of course, there's the Tuesday night class on Holy Mother's life, the Wednesday night class on Bhagavad-Gita. Saturday morning at 11 a.m., we're studying Swami Prabhavananda's talks and collected in the book Realizing God. And then next Sunday, we'll have an open forum on Bhakti, so we'll all have a chance to contribute. And as I said, there will be a discussion guide that will be available to you probably no sooner than Thursday, but almost certainly on Thursday, weather willing. And it'll be fun to have a discussion about what it means to practice bhakti next Sunday. So, Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. Until next time.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Thank you. Great session.
Bye.
Bye-bye all.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.